Okay. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kaminsky?
Here.
Mr. DeSarno?
Here.
Mrs. Jeffroy?
Here.
Mayor Morgan?
Here.
Ms. Munoz?
Present.
Mrs. McKnight? Here. Mrs. Belisca?
I salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a public meeting of Borough Council, Borough of New Providence County, Union State, New Jersey. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with PL 1975. Chapter 231, that an annual notice of revision was made in conformance with Section 13 of the Act. Can I have a motion for approval of minutes for August 16th, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No? So be it. September 27th, motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No? So be it. We have a correspondence from PSE&G recording the notice of upcoming vegetation and management work. As you know, that Public Service and New Jersey Central, they all get statewide general permits to clear vegetation around their lines and gas facilities. And before we go to council business, I see our engineer, Andy Hippolyt's here. And I know he's going to give us an update on the bridge on Commerce Street. Thanks for coming by, Andy.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Couple things. One is on Commerce Street Bridge. As you know, all the construction work, associated piles, concrete work's all completed. The issue with the bridge has been the supply of the materials. All the materials have now come in. The bridge is being constructed and it'll be delivered on November 1st. It'll take approximately 2 weeks. It'll be set, but it'll take about 2 weeks before it opens up,
Okay.
which is good news.
As you know, I've been very disappointed in the company that you've been working with has given us January, March, June, August.
I know the issue. There's the materials. I mean, I know you hear this all the time. There's a supply of materials issue. There's no doubt about it. The other two bridges that we had done were rushed. They were smaller bridges. They got in the pipeline a little bit faster. Materials have been a huge problem this year, especially aluminum, steel. It was ordered significantly early. It just has taken a long time to construct it. We've literally gone out to the plant, and you were one of a lot of communities that had a lot of bridges that got destroyed in Hurricane Ida. So
Understood. And I know the supply chain is bad. I mean, we ordered 2 police cars, and it's on the agenda today from Koch Ford, and we've been dealing with them for decades. And always gotten a great price from them, and they couldn't supply the police cars this year, so we had to go someplace else. So, and it's going to cost us a little more money, but we need the vehicles.
right. So you have the same problem.
The same problem.
with the flashing beacons. So your flashing
Right.
beacons on Central and Valentine's, the same exact problem. Supply of materials is a problem. Costs have gone way up because aluminum prices way up.
Right.
We got prices from the cooperative. The prices have been adjusted upwards, so they're literally almost $10,000 more than you should pay. Our recommendation, working with Bernadette and the Sergeant Diamond, is to literally go to bid, add a couple of the existing locations that have older flashing beacons to match the new ones,
Right.
and then bid it as a package.
Yeah.
There's not much to do. Aluminum's at an all-time high right now.
We've had lots of cans laying around.
Yeah. The only other one I have for you is Fairmont. It's on your
Yeah.
agenda for award tonight. And there is some discussion about what's happening on that. So just real quick, it's a million paving, small profiling to get the road, has some inconsistencies in it. We're going to be adding curb to it and tying to that existing, we'll say road/driveway to those few houses that are being built on the right side as you get down.
Okay.
And a little improved turnaround at the end.
Okay, and Bromley and Woodcrest are getting done too, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming tonight.
You're welcome.
We always like an update on where we are, so
As soon as I get more information on the bridge, I will let the administrator know, and she can let you know.
I have never seen, those steel beams, the pilings, it looks like the George Washington Bridge. It's huge. That's going nowhere.
Right, a little bit. I mean, I'm sure Kevin told you, the difference between the two bridges that were completed and this one is those bridges had all that already.
Yeah.
This bridge did not have that. This bridge was set on literally telephone poles with concrete footings, and it was not. It had to all come out.
I know, I was a kid when those were put in, so,
By the hockey rink back there.
yeah, about a hockey rink. And I'll tell you, that was what, 64, 63, 64, so, you know, it's lasted a long time.
It lasted a long time. It was
So,
done.
okay, thank you, Andy.
Great. No, thank you very much.
Anybody else have any questions for
So
Andy?
I just want to confirm. So you said the first it'll be delivered, 2-week installation?
It's about 2 weeks before it opens, so it comes in pieces, and they'll put it together here. We are doing everything we can to rush that work, but there just takes time to put a lot of nuts and bolts together and make sure it's done. There is a little approach work, because once it's set, we have to do a little paving on both sides. So there's a little approach work. So it'll take 2 weeks max. So what they've told us is first delivery, 14th open.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks
Thanks.
for the update.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's go to council business. Diane, administration.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have the green light on my button, so I hope everybody hears me. We have the 2023 meeting and holiday schedule for the borough. It's the proposed employee holiday schedule and borough council meetings, which are every other week generally. So, are there any questions?
Just, I think there was one council meeting the Tuesday after Easter, which is also, I believe,
School's out.
break, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I'm not sure anybody is going to be taking vacations with their families and whatnot. I don't know if that's something we want to consider for that one day. We can maybe address it later.
I don't know if we should address it later, because you have the calendar coming out, right? During that?
I mean, if we move that meeting up a week, then it'll be back to back, right? From the previous month.
And then planning board has meetings on those other days.
Right.
So,
Should we not have a meeting that week? I don't know. Just bringing it up. I was looking at it today thinking
Was that April 11th? Yep.
that week's going to be,
Yeah, I was just looking where the March was.
And just so the public's crystal clear, we're keeping the council meetings remain on Tuesdays at 7:30.
yes.
Yes. Yeah,
But we-
Easter Sunday is the 9th this year, and you're talking about April 11th.
You could do just one meeting on the 18th if you wanted. Move it, they wait for our schedule.
So we can do one in April if you'd like on the 18th in the middle of the month. This way we can pay the bills.
Yeah, we gotta pay the bills.
Need to do that.
Move it from that holiday week down and cancel the last one.
I'm fine either way. I'm probably not.
Okay, and you know, if we have to have another one, 2 in a row, we can do it.
Just schedule it.
Okay, that's fine. Is that good with everyone?
So the 18th.
Fine by me, I'll be off.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Okay, Matt, finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 2022-259 is a resolution providing for the insertion of any special item of revenue in the 2022 budget pursuant of NJS 40A-4-87, Chapter 159, PL 1948. This is a AAA pedestrian safety enforcement grant. So we received $960 from AAA for pedestrian safety enforcement. That enforcement was done in the month of September. Thank them for that. Resolution 2022-260 is a resolution authorizing payment of the attached bills payable list in the amount of $1,646,526.21. This is our normal bills payable. Significant items in this include our Board of Education payment of $1,362,025 for our October payment. Library, $85,585 for that October payment, as well as $54,215 to Gen Electric for pedestrian safety beacons at Central, Balcom, and Spring Streets, which will be paid out of our capital funds.
Okay, and I'm gonna switch this around and do the engineering at the end, the discussion
Okay.
items. Okay, public safety, we have raffle licenses, for New Providence Host Company, RA 1171 and 1172. And they were properly, prepared and reviewed. Introduction of ordinance 16, and it's amending the vehicle and traffic code. Is to clean up the ordinances to include the addition of the dedicated turn lanes at the left-hand turn lanes at intersection of South and Central, and also to match the county's left-hand turn lane on South Street and High, and the addition of the dedicated turn lanes left and right on Balcony, because now it's a one-way. Resolution 261, this is what I was talking about before, is that approving the purchase for Nielsen Ford in Morristown not to exceed $81,015.92. And as I explained before, we try to get cars from Koch Ford. What we usually try and do, and that's worked in the past, is that we always wait to the end of the year, and they usually have a couple models left over, and we usually pick them up for a really good price. This year, there was no supply. We ordered them, no supply, so we had to go to another vendor. Okay, Public Works, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 2022-262, as Andy was saying earlier, this is a resolution accepting bids and awarding contract to Riverview Paving for New Jersey DOT fiscal year 2022. This is for Fairmont Road, Bromley Court, and Woodcrest Drive improvements in the amount of $815,437.82.
Okay, we'll go to engineering and Matt.
Thank you. So this is an introduction of ordinance 2022-15. This is an ordinance amending and supplementing chapter 310 of the code of the Borough of New Providence entitled zoning. So if you remember, this is an ordinance that we introduced a few meetings back, and then we had some discussion. It went to the planning board. Planning board came back with a recommendation. We heard that recommendation, had a further discussion. We pulled the original ordinance, rescinded the original ordinance, and are now reintroducing. This introduction includes a couple of the current following revisions. One, permitted height in the CCD was reduced from 3 stories, 45 feet, to 3 stories, 38 feet in our downtown. The permitted height in the CCD TH, which is our townhouse, was reduced from 3 stories, 45 feet, to 3 stories, 38 feet. And permitted uses in the CCD TH was amended to also include only townhouses, and that's in our Elkwood Avenue section. This ordinance, after today, will go back to the planning board. Planning board will review for consistency with the master plan, and then if approved, will come back to us.
I actually have a comment.
Go ahead.
And looking through all of the, I guess was the 2016 master plan, I was looking at the schedule that included the heights for all the different townhouses and all the different zones. And this particular townhouse set seems to be varying from what that is. Those townhouses have 2.5 stories and 35 feet maximum height. And I believe, in my opinion, I think that would be a better height and usage of those buildings to make it more consistent, to keep the residential feel, particularly over on Elkwood. So I would like to request having that amended from 38 feet to 35 feet and from 3 stories to 2.5 stories.
And these are for the townhomes that would only be built potentially.
Potentially built on Elkwood
On Elkwood.
Avenue. And that kind of, when you look at, I was looking for other comparables as well. So if you look at the townhouses that are right next to OLP, or the townhouses on Marion Avenue, or the new ones in the Garden Market there, all those residences are zoned for 2.5 stories and 35 feet. So this seems to be extra and not really as much residential. And particularly over on Elkwood Avenue, I think it should retain that same residential feel.
So Nadine, let me ask you, the CCDTH zone, that's Elkwood, but I believe it was also part of Gales Drive.
Yes, also part of Gales Drive.
So that would-
Gales Drive at the TD Bank side of it as well. And no commercial is currently, that was the last thing that Matt said. They were taking the commercial usage out of it. So it would just be 2.5 stories of residential with the parking on the bottom and 2 residential stories above. I just think it makes it more consistent. All the townhouses and all the zones are 2.5 stories and 35 feet. Any thoughts?
Okay.
I have, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you first.
I have thought about the fact that when we zoned that area that you're specifically talking about for townhouses, it was back in 16 before Marion Avenue and OLP. And several people have said to me, do we really need townhouses in that area? Because it would increase the density. So I think that's something that we need to consider also. Do we need to rezone that or put it back to the original? Because there's houses there right now. There's 5 houses, I believe.
Well, this is a document that allows somebody to do it. That doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
It's not a guarantee that there's nothing in the pipeline right now for that to
In
happen.
fact, right now, McKinley, why don't you come up and answer these questions, because you're the planner, and you've gone through this.
I'm sorry, I probably
With the
should have addressed my question to you. I apologize.
No, of course not. So to address your concern about what's existing versus proposed versus adopted, the townhouses that are built in the southern section of the proposed CCD-TH zone, those have been there. Those aren't going anywhere.
That's
There's-
Gales Drive.
That's the Gales Drive one. It's to the west of Gales Drive. Those aren't going anywhere. The
Those
one,
are there already.
yeah, those are existing, and the point of putting them into this zone is really to bring their use into conformance, because they were, I apologize that I don't know the history of those, but they were not previously permitted in their state. So now they were a conforming use. The zone on Elkwood up just over here, the intention of doing the townhouses there was because those properties abut the commercial district. They always have. That's not changing. And so the thought was, if somebody wanted to, and as Nadine, you just said, no one has to, there's no plan to do it right now, they could come in with the townhouse development, and it would provide really a step down in density and bulk to the single family detached residential across the street. So that was the thought of those properties really acting like a transition zone between the more intense commercial uses and a single family across the street.
So is it fair to say, though, if we don't address that townhouse district, are those properties, if one were sold, a lot of things could happen, right? They could build one huge home, right? A bigger lot, right? Build one huge home that sticks out and
Correct.
doesn't conform with the neighborhood at all.
Right. I mean, as a homeowner, as a property owner, you can build whatever is within the confines of the ordinance, or you could ask for a variance from the zoning board.
Or that's
Yeah.
my next point. Or they could buy the property and develop the property have plans to develop the property that are not conforming and have to go to the zoning board,
Mhm.
which would then review it and could potentially approve it anyway.
Correct.
Right. And what the idea and concept behind this is to plan for something to provide the opportunity for builders to see potential, to say that this is part of the master plan, and if I wanted to develop something like that, and few properties came available, I would do that, and it would be within the guidelines and the plans of our, the things that we put in our master plan as far as our standards and whatnot, right? So that's the difference, right? At the end of the day, do you leave it and it potentially has a lot of other opportunities to happen within those properties, or you try to design standards and say, if it's going to happen, then we would rather it happen, in accordance with the design standards that we would like, in accordance with our master plan.
You're exactly correct.
Yep.
We want to have standards, because if you don't, it's the Wild West. And you definitely want some standards. And, the planning board, as well as McKinley and Keith and Margaret and Debbie, you've all gone through this with a fine tooth comb, and you gave us your recommendations. So, I always say, you're professionals, you're guided by your professionals. But, no, this is a council decision where you want to go with this. And, you know,
I have a couple of questions. I guess one's for you and one's for Paul. So what do you think about this proposed amendment to that townhouse zoning by Elkwood Avenue?
To Nadine's to
Yes.
slightly reduce the height.
Right.
From my perspective, I think it would be appropriate if you wish to see a slightly lower height there. Honestly, I don't think it's going to diminish the development potential of those properties. 3 stories for a townhouse, the thought behind that is so that you could fit a good sized garage on the ground floor. You don't really have much usable space on the ground floor. So it would really be a garage, a mudroom, maybe a tiny office, and then 2 full floors above it for usually living and kitchen, maybe 1 bedroom on the middle floor, and then all the other bedrooms on the 3rd floor. That was the thought process behind allowing for that extra 3rd floor, was to just allow for a modern living space. Having said that, 2.5 stories for a townhouse is absolutely developable. I think that's going to come down to a preference on behalf of the council and really what you want to see there. I would not be opposed to either standard.
And just,
Can you
sorry.
explain
all
the
have
half
questions.
story? What's a half story?
So the way we've defined it in the ordinance is that it has to be less than 1/3 of the floor area below it. So to use easy numbers, if you have 100 square foot 2nd floor, your 3rd floor has to be less than 33 square feet. That's obviously very tiny, but easy math.
It's like an attic, basically.
Basically an attic, yeah, we've seen some, they can be habitable, because an office, you're likely not gonna get a bathroom up there. Play area for kids, workout area, that kind of thing is what you usually see in a space that size.
So comparable to that, the townhouses on Marion Avenue, aren't those 2.5?
I believe those are, the ones that were approved via a use variance next to the church, those are a full 3 though.
And that's a good point though, right? So to have two and a half versus 3 and having parking underneath, right? It all depends on the size of a lot and the ability to be able to park in front, right? And those have plenty of parking spaces. And I believe these properties would have plenty of room.
Right, of course, and that's the other point. So if they didn't end up doing a ground floor garage and just did outside parking, or just tried to fit 1 car into a garage instead of 2, then there would be more usable space on that ground floor.
you can always put the parking in the back too.
And
Yeah.
that was how that's how the design standards are really trying to get those properties to develop eventually, is to put parking a little bit more towards the back so that you have that nice, sidewalks are
Right.
required, we don't want cars to be like parked over sidewalks because that's not pedestrian friendly. So the design standards in here actually encourage rear yard parking for those townhomes.
Because we always thought we would put sidewalk along there. Because people do travel from downtown and walk down.
Yeah, I've seen
They
people
might
just
have
walking
to
on the
cross.
street, yeah.
So Paul, how would this affect the timing of this ordinance if we were to go along with Nadine's modification?
Well, if you're gonna, are you revising this at this point for introduction? Would be my question.
Could we introduce it as amended?
Yeah, I would think you could do that.
Because it's
tonight.
going back to the planning board anyway, right?
Right, so if you want to amend it tonight, and pass it for introduction, and then it can go to the planning board at that point.
If I could shift the conversation just a bit to downtown now. So what's being proposed this evening is 3 stories, 38 feet downtown, which would result in additional development or density in our downtown, additional height as well as livable space. I spoke at length during the discussion period last, I guess, 2 weeks ago, about my opposition to going in this direction, and the fact that I had sincere and deep concerns that this would negatively impact the quaint feel of our downtown that we cherish. Let's talk specifically. When I talk to residents in these towns right now, as I'm sure you probably agree with, the biggest concern I'm hearing nowadays is density and development in New Jersey and in towns around us. We have some of that development coming our way probably in the near future, right? With some of the properties, Bard, and then Mountain Avenue has opportunities to develop as well. We're going to see a significant percentage increase in this town of residents. Now, folks, let me add It's not just our town. We have more density. Look, go to Berkeley Heights on Springfield Avenue, you see it. Go down River Road in Chatham, and you see it. This is a concern of our residents. And tonight, we're talking about voluntarily adding more density to our downtown. Folks, I gotta tell you, I am totally against this. I don't think it's the direction we want to go in. We're leveraging or looking at a master plan that's 8 years old. A master plan that was done at a time when we needed to encourage development. We had old buildings in town. There was a thought, hey, maybe we need to, modernize. It's been done. People have invested in this town, have found it economically feasible to invest in this town at 1 story. There's no need to add 2 more. None at all. So I would hope that this aspect of this ordinance would come out. I don't see a need for it at all. I think it's contrary to what our interests are in a town that values and cherishes the unique and special feel of our downtown that I would add is currently thriving.
I do have a follow-up question. So if this were to go through with the CCD, 3 stories, 38 feet, does this automatically mean that all the buildings downtown would automatically be able to flip as they exist right now?
They would be automatically given the right to build up to 3 stories. It's not, usually it would end up having to be, from a logistical standpoint, these structures were not built to be built upon, on top of. It would be new development, it would be infill development, it would be, but to answer your question, yes, they would be given the right to go up to 3 stories.
So where does parking come into?
Yeah.
So that's a good point, and that's something I did want to touch on. So there is still, your parking requirements still exist, and they are de facto a control of the density downtown. Any development that comes in has to prove that they can meet the parking standards. There is a shared parking option that has been talked about with this council for many years. My understanding is that hasn't been very amenable with the business owners downtown. They don't really want to enter into those agreements. So if a developer comes in with a shared parking arrangement, the requirement is that they have to provide at the time of planning board that shared parking arrangement, and that has to be agreed upon, or they have to provide everything on site. And if they cannot provide everything on site, they have to seek a variance from the planning board. And I, at this point, would not recommend the planning board grant any of those variances. Of course, there's always extenuating circumstances, but none I can think of off the top of my head. So there is a control in place through the parking already, to your point.
So it's really a small number of buildings that this would be able to be applied to right now.
Exactly, and developers could get creative. Some could do cantilever buildings with parking underneath. There's options that I've seen in other small towns, but right, they would have to come in. Any development that came in right now would have to meet that parking standard. And we did not change the commercial parking standards from what the borough has always implemented.
Well, I will note that, it was brought up the new medical building. And that was proposed 3 stories.
Mhm.
And the builder realized he didn't have the parking requirements, and he himself made it 1 story.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, I would
there
imagine
are checks and balances.
there are, and I would imagine that the bulk of this development, it's not going to happen overnight. I can tell you that, because as the councilman said, you do have a thriving downtown. The purpose of these standards 6-7 years ago, whenever that was now, was to envision an evolution for the future of New Providence's downtown. I do think it's a tractable standard for developers. I think people will be interested, but they're going to have to meet your parking. They're going to have to meet all of the other standards that are within this, setbacks, and there's minimum height for the ground floor. All of these things have to go into play now. So they're checks and balances. We're not just going to wake up tomorrow and have new buildings across
Are
the
there
town.
setback requirements?
There are, yeah, there's certain ones, let me see, associated with front and rear, all of these to make sure. So 10 feet front yard, and they have to have, so the 10 feet front yard is the minimum. There are no side or rear setbacks, but there's no instance where they would build to the lot lines. The reason why we didn't put a rear yard setback in is just to provide the flexibility with how people are going to put parking on this site. It's because all the lots are very different sizes. There wasn't a standard that was easy to come up with, but there is a front yard setback to help with some of the push and pull of the facades.
So even though there's not a lot coverage, that lot, existing lot has to include all the parking and the front setback.
Correct. There's no way a building could come in with a full 0 lot set line on all 4 lot lines.
Yeah, the fear is that a 3-story building will go in, right, like, with no setback at all and just feel claustrophobic or suffocating.
Right, and you do have very nice sidewalks here in town, which is a very nice amenity. They are nice and wide, and they're good for pedestrians to walk. So I do think, really, from my planning perspective, I do think with the up to 10-foot front setback and the negotiations that the board has through site plan, I do think it'll create a very nice pedestrian walkway and wall. I don't think it's going to feel. You also have a very wide right of way. Cartway, I should say, from curb to curb, it's about 40 feet. Plus, you've got about 10-foot sidewalks. So when you're looking down the street, you have a very nice section really going through there. I honestly, from my perspective, do not think anything would make you feel caved in. If we were coming in with 5, 6, 7 stories, maybe, but I really don't feel like with this proposal, that's an option.
And that's on that Schedule 3.
Okay, any other questions by council? No, we'll open it up to the public. Stand by, McKinley.
Just sit right here.
Anybody wishing to address council at this time, please give their name and address. Yeah, Jeff.
Jeff Grove, 240 Central Avenue, New Providence. The changes that you were considering were based and guided on testimony and opinions of professionals. Well, tonight I'll be testifying and giving my opinion as a professional this evening. Just so you know, I graduated Rutgers 1985, summa cum laude, a degree in landscape architecture and environmental planning. 37 years, urban planning and design in the tri-state area, throughout the United States and Canada. I've done downtown master plans in towns and cities like that are like New Providence and bigger. I've done work in downtown Chappaqua, New York. Did the master plan for downtown Wyckoff in Bergen County. I also worked in the planning for the downtown in Newark. So this is not unfamiliar to me. And if we want to be guided by the testimony and opinions of professionals, I am one. So I have the same experience as the professionals that you've been listening to, only one difference. I live here. I know the town for over 6 decades, and I have insight that no one else that you have to live here to know. And I draw upon that experience to guide what I'm about to tell you. So who knows best what this town needs and what it is and what it's like? Standard planning, standard planning is okay in lots of instances, but it's got to be fine-tuned for each specific town. And I think that that's where we slightly veer from what standard planning options include. And I'll tell you how. In general, what's proposed is a solution that was commonly implemented years ago across many towns in this state, but it's just an opinion of a planner at the time, and it's no longer valid in my opinion. It's not applicable here to maintain the unique qualities that make New Providence, and that's why people come here. So I'm going to ask you, what exactly is the problem that this revision is attempting to remedy? What's the problem? Anybody know? Can anybody answer that question? What's the problem that this revision is trying to?
You're going to give us testimony. We're not here to answer questions.
Okay, I'll tell you. I don't know. I don't think there is a problem. To Councilman DeSarno's testimony before was that the downtown's fully rented and it's thriving, and we don't have the same set of circumstances that were in place 6 years ago, which very different economic time and circumstance. So back then, we were kind of desperate to attract developers. Now, I think the town is doing okay, and I think you'd agree to that. So what attracts residents to New Providence? Well, we all know what it is. It's the schools, duh. It's the neighborhoods, the people, it's the friendliness, and it's the small town feel. How do you make a small town feel? How do you do that physically, right? It's all about the physicality of a small town. And besides the other elements that include the social aspects and such. We are not Summit. We are not Westfield. We are not Cranford. We're not Fanwood. And we're not Berkeley Heights, all, by the way, which have the three-story, allowable 3 stories. We're a small town, and that's our charm and our appeal. And I believe the change that's on the table this evening will kill that. Be very blunt with you. You're elected to represent all the citizens and the wishes of all the residents in town. Are there hordes of citizens banging on your door? I want 3 stories. I don't think so. I really don't. I'm not seeing it. I'm not hearing it. I really doubt that's the case. So again, I asked the question, what are we trying to remedy here with this? I'm not seeing it. The proposed change may make a few developers or property owners happy, but what about the rest of the population that came here for a very specific reason? What about their needs, and why they elected you, and why they came here in the first place? This, I believe, what we're considering tonight is a rush to judgment. That's something that's unwarranted at this time. I truly believe that. No one is calling for this. Who's calling for it? Ask yourself that question. Who's calling for this? I don't know. What's the rush? I believe you're skipping a step. It needs to be a measured, incremental approach. You can and must be more thoughtful when considering a change that's this big, that's going to fundamentally alter the character of our town forever. So you've already voted down 45 feet and 3 stories, thinking that was too big. You think 38 feet and 3 stories is a compromise. It's not. It's exactly the same as 45 and 3 stories. It's the 3 stories that's going to make it feel like it is oversized and bulked up compared to what we understand a small town feel to be today. It's no better. It's not a compromise. It's exactly the same. Feel-wise and bulk-wise and density impact-wise, it's exactly the same. So this is really a rush to judgment that misses an interim step that you could take that's really quite reasonable for a first step. You could have, as a new change to the ordinance, you could allow 2 or 2.5 stories, it's 2 now. You could go to 2.5 stories with residential over retail, which is currently not permitted, and that's a big deal. That's a big change. So if you went to 32 or 35 feet, that would keep the look and the feel of the downtown. And just to what we heard this evening, if you go to townhouses at 2.5 stories and 35 feet or so, that would be consistent with that too, as you're asking for consistency across your standards. That would be pretty much still intact, but still allowing many new opportunities for new residential in the downtown core area. You could do that. And that's an interim step before you go all the way. This would be very reasonable, first step, and then other aspects could be added later. With 3 stories, 1 commercial and 2 residential above, you very well may see a density that's quickly recognized as problematic. And I guarantee you that very well may happen. Very soon you may recognize that as something that's problematic and you go, ooh, so maybe we should have done that. So there's lots of other new residential coming to town. And as Councilmember Sarno said, this is could become problematic quite quickly with the amount of density that's coming to town quickly. And if this were to pass as currently proposed, and the first building that builds to it, that's it. There's no backseas, there's no going over. You're not going to take down a half a story. You're going to have that thing for 80 years or 100 years. And that's it. There's no going back. You could revise the ordinance, but they're not going to unbuild what they build and shrink it. You got it. So instead of going there and trying to pull it back, you could go up to it from here incrementally and see if that's okay, or if you need more, then pass it again to go a little higher. But this is missing step 2, going from 1 to 3. I think the character of New Providence would be changed forever if you make the move that's on the being proposed this evening. So what really reflects the spirit of a small town? I'm not asking you to define it this evening, other than to consider in your mind's eye what you've known for so long, what that to be, and then project what 3 stories and 38 feet would be like, and say, is this still a small town? I don't know. I'm asking you, do not approve the proposed change this evening, and instead take a more measured interim step and make smaller change now to see how the public reacts and how the market reacts. You want to see if this is quickly embraced, or nobody does it, or just see what happens. But it's one of those things that you can't unpeel or can't undo if you go there right away. And that's probably the biggest thing that I want to make this evening. Other than it being the recommendation of the professionals, again, he's one, I'm one, we're all professionals here. They put on a suit. We're pretty good, right? And if you guys were to hire a firm like this is how I go and give testimony. I want you to understand that the council's reasoning for I need to understand what your reasoning is for taking such a fundamental step as this. Because if somebody asks me to explain it, you got to be able to tell me why, so I can explain it to somebody else. Right now, I couldn't. And if I couldn't explain it to somebody, I'm not sure, maybe somebody else might not be able to, too. Again, I ask you, what is the demand? I don't think I'm hearing it yet. And are we being held back because we don't have this in place? I don't think so. So let's think of another way to pass the vast majority of the ordinance that's on the table, which is long overdue, having people asking for variances all the time. So out of the 199 pages of change, there's 198 pages that are overdue because it's a warrant of misunderstanding, and make it very simple for people to go in and find out what's the regulations say. But this one, I think we need to, as has been suggested this evening, either separate it out or make it an amendment to the ordinance on the table, and think about it as an interim step that you could revise in a later date. It's my recommendation to you that you table this one for now, because it's town altering. You're going to make a decision tonight that's going to stick around for 100 years, and give it the very thoughtful and consideration that it's due. You owe it to your constituents, the people that voted for you, put you here, why they came to New Providence as a small town, and let them weigh in and let them tell you of what their desire is. You don't have to do this now. If you pass it, there's no going back. And that's my
Thank you for
opinion.
your comments, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. Bob Connolly, 415 Elkwood. You folks heard me a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad that now I'm hearing that there's some serious consideration given to really looking at what was developed 6 years ago. So thank you for that. Again, my prime concern is the whole CCD TH designation. If you look at the zoning ordinance, you see that there's a description of that TH area, which is new to the ordinance. And the description, I'm going to paraphrase, is to bring additional customers and some retail into the downtown business area. Well, what's going to happen is, again, you've got townhouses going in. The estimate is 8 to 10 townhouses. Assume 2 persons per townhouse residence, or 2.5 persons. So you're making space for 30 people, but you're displacing 15 to 20 in the existing residential area, if that takes place. I don't see a net gain there. And now we're talking about not having retail at all. in these buildings. So we're replacing single-family homes with townhouses. I think we're doing a lot of townhouses in town. I just don't, and, you know, don't look at me, this isn't, I'm not in my backyard kind of complaint I'm making here. If you were to take the senior citizen zone, expand that down in Elkwood, and expand the Barabash apartments, I'd love to house more seniors here. I don't think we need to attract townhouse dwellers in place of existing residents, existing homes. I think of my hometown back when I was a kid, Livingston. You guys might realize the intersection of Mount Pleasant Avenue and South Livingston Avenue used to be a movie theater, you know, 5 and 10 grocery stores. They replaced that 15, 20 years ago with what the existing residents now call the projects. It's a huge retail, commercial, mixed use area, acres of parking lots. I think it's 4-story brick buildings and retail. And the existing residents were sick over it. So again, as Mr. Grove said, we don't want to do anything that we really, really might regret. My solution to it, the immediate need is, as Jeff said, we need to get the zoning ordinance passed. It's way too long. We need to get everything codified. If we just pull out that CCDTH completely from the zoning ordinance revisions, we have its opportunity to revisit that while getting the rest of this stuff done.
Good, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify one thing? Because I want to make sure none of the other residents are confused. We're not displacing residents. There's no requirement for the residents in what is the proposed TH zone to leave, to sell, to redevelop. This is not a redevelopment zone. So I just want to make sure there's no condemnation. We're not taking properties. We're not displacing any residents. The proposal is a rezoning, not a condemnation redevelopment. So in case there was any other confusion about that, I don't want any property owners to think we are trying to take their property or kick them out, because that is absolutely not what's happening.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I also want to say that it's been out on Facebook and social media. It shows a picture with a big arch and come welcome to New Providence. That was a stock photo that was used, and they used that stock photo and just changed the name of the town. So that's nothing of what we're talking about here. And I think people, you know, get upset when they see something like that. And it's actually a misrepresentation. So I just wanted to bring that to light. Anybody else wishing to address council? Yes, Alan.
Alan Swanson, 47 Overhill Road. Since you mentioned the picture that came from the downtown master plan that I placed onto the community forum, I simply placed it there because that was the cover of the downtown master plan document. And I was asked about that, and on the same forum indicated that that's what it was. That was just to sort of define what the document was, and that was how the document was defined. Keith Lynch sat here at the last meeting and said that this ordinance was in part going to facilitate the use of the downtown structures for commercial activities on the first floor and allowing for residential use on the floors above, so that essentially the first floor would be, well, the one development that has actually been proposed, which is for the where the florist used to be, is for a 3-story building with commercial endeavor in the first floor and 4 apartments. So that's on the books now. It's came before the board, the planning board. At the candidates forum on Thursday, all 6 candidates were asked what they thought the #1 challenge faced New Providence in the future. And all 6 said that the number one challenge is excessive growth and high-density housing, every one of them. Someone needs to explain to me, I guess I'll make the rhetorical question as Jeff has, how it is that if the number one concern on the part of all of the candidates running for the offices this year is overdevelopment, and we're proposing an ordinance that, as Peter points out, is going to increase our development and increase the number of people that are in the town. I think it's important to address that, since that seems to be what people believe is the number one concern, both from the candidates and as Peter points out. I have the same concern to some extent. The other thing that I'd like to say is that I am in total agreement with Jeff. I think that Jeff presents the argument against a measured approach to this ordinance change, specifically with regard to the height of the buildings in the downtown area. I happen to agree with him. And I think I mentioned the last time I spoke about it. I believe that most of the changes, all of there are 199 pages in the document today. 197 of them are absolutely excellent, especially the areas talking about pedestrians, trying to improve the downtown and make it more welcoming to people. I think that that's really what we should be focusing on. And I think that Jeff and those of us, I've lived here 22 years, I don't have that many decades, feel that let's make it's fine, let's make it more welcoming. And I also agree that I'm not sure where the necessity is. We have questions about, do we need the additional residential? We have questions about the appearance, questions about the parking. What I'm getting at is what we're doing is, as we speak about this, we come up with more and more questions about how is this going to work? How is that going to work? So let me conclude by just saying that I agree with Jeff. I think it's really important to table the aspect of the height of the buildings and that significant change that you want to make, and to approach everything with an interim approach, as he mentioned. I think that that's really the approach that would be welcomed by the citizens in the town. And I hope you'll do it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to address council? Seeing no one, I declare public comments closed.
Nadine, go ahead.
Hey, could I just add, before we do any further, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but it seems like there was a couple of questions of why, right? So I think that's the appropriate thing, right? You're our planner, right? Why would we propose what we're proposing in this master plan?
So I think the big issue seems to be the 3 stories here. I know Mr. Grove spoke last time about being okay with 2 stories, having residential over commercial. He didn't seem to recant that. So I'm going to assume that that's still his position. So it sounds like we're kind of talking 2 stories versus 3 stories, or I know Mr. DeSarno, you prefer 1 story, but the 3-story concept here for downtown came from.
But I'm open to compromise.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good to know. The idea of the 3-story concept here is to provide a few things: flexibility with design. I know density seems to be a 4-letter word, and we're not trying to bring in excessive density to the downtown here. You're going to be getting with these residential units 2 bedrooms max, honestly. They're going to be single people, married people. Typically, that's going to be your tenants. But what you get, we've talked about this last time, you get a sense of community in the downtown that is 24/7 here. You get an eyes on the street concept, a safety concept of people always being there. We talked about having the commercial base where people don't have to drive to the downtown. And it gives opportunities, there could be additional opportunities to provide more office space in the downtown. Those office spaces could be, they're not always appropriate for a ground floor commercial use. A lot of times they prefer a second floor space. So we're not saying that all of the upper floor uses are going to be residential, that they have to be residential. Residential can only be up there, they couldn't be on the ground floor, but it provides additional opportunity for economic growth. And going from 1 stories to 3 stories was considered back, again, we're talking 6 years ago that it was considered, because that was considered the incremental step.
Our current ordinance states what?
The current ordinance allows up to 2 stories, but I think
Okay, I'm not sure why you keep saying one. We're currently
Well, I guess
2, right?
I'm referring to what you said before, where a lot of the
No, well,
development
I
that's
said
come in
it was
has been
economically feasible to
1.
develop that one site at one.
Right.
But our
so-
current ordinance is 2 stories, 30 feet, I believe, correct?
Right, so this would be an increased height from that, even if we
Just
were
want
to
to
keep.
clarify that, thank you.
Right, so the thought was this was the incremental approach. We're not going to 5 stories. And I agree, you're not Westfield, you're not Summit, and all of those towns, while they do have 3-story buildings, they have a lot of 5-story buildings there too. And so it makes those smaller buildings even feel more oppressive because they are with the larger bulk of the larger buildings. So the 3 stories was the incremental step. And it was the thought that, I think I said before, looking towards the future and seeing how New Providence could grow in an appropriate way that wouldn't be an overbearing approach on the town. Growing economically by allowing for additional businesses to come in and allowing for small scale residential to come in. These 2-bedroom apartments are really your new age starter homes. I can speak personally from my generation. We are not buying starter homes in our 20s. We're living in 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments until we're in our 30s and then buying a home. So it actually does also provide a small affordable A option. I'm not talking COA here, but it gives a different type of unit option for your current residents or even if new residents are to come in. So really from a planning perspective, those are all of the components we think of when we are considering additional stories for a downtown. I really do honestly believe it's appropriate for a small, I do think New Providence is a small town, and I think 3 stories would maintain the small town feel of it. That's of course, it is subjective to a point. That's why we're here, for you guys to make that decision on your behalf. But from a planning perspective, those were the thoughts that went in to the additional height and the 3 stories and the additional options for these uses.
Thank you.
So can I call motion?
Okay.
Change? So I would like to call motion to change the permitted height in the CCD-TH from 38 feet to 35 feet, and instead of 3 stories to 2.5 stories, to be considered with the ordinance, so we can move forward with it as amended.
You know, I'm happy that there's been some reflection by this committee and some good discussion. You'll recall that in our last discussion, Mr. Grove came up here and offered the same compromise, quite frankly. And what was put forth was what we're looking at today. So I was disappointed with that, but I'm happy now there's been some reconsideration, and I think we're moving much more. So you're saying you're putting forth from going from 2 stories, 30 feet, to 2.5, 32 in our downtown. Is that correct? Is that what I mean?
No, we're
Go ahead.
saying on the CCD-TH. So instead of the 38 feet for the townhouses over
Okay,
Elmwood
yep.
Avenue, pulling that down to 35 feet
Okay.
and 2.5 stories, so it would be more consistent with the other residential townhouses
Okay.
throughout the
And
borough.
I'm sorry, are you not saying anything at the downtown?
No.
Oh, I thought I heard differently. I'm sorry to hear that. When we vote on this, can we pull this one out, please? As a separate vote? Thank you.
But we're not voting on that, we're changing.
We're just
the
introducing
ordinance. We're just introducing it. We're not,
Motions to amend.
the motions to amend, not anything about passing the ordinance.
A second.
Roll call?
Mr. Kaminsky?
Aye.
Mr. Jusarno?
No.
Mrs. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Mr. Munoz?
Yes.
Mrs. McKnight? Yes. Mrs. Belisca?
Yes.
Hang on a minute. That was the motion to, just to make sure I'm crystal clear on what we just, that was the motion to,
Amend.
for that one piece?
Yes.
For that
The
one.
townhouses on Oakwood.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a yes to that. But are we going to vote separately on this ordinance 310?
Yes, we can have a separate vote.
I would like that. Thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to 310?
It's on the consent agenda. Mr.
Oh, okay. Now this has to go back to the planning board. I would ask that we, ask the planning board to give us their recommendation on that height. Okay, I think we meet next week,
Next Tuesday.
next Tuesday. And, you know, if they make a recommendation to lower it, that's, you know, something that we would have to think about. But, you know, this is, they've worked very hard, Matt, you know that, on this for a number of years. So I think what we have to look at is what's New Providence gonna look like 10 years from now with the economy tanking? I don't know. But, I think it's something that a lot of people have to take a look at and let the planning board, get their eyes on it and give us another recommendation. Okay? Is everybody in agreement with that? Give us a firm recommendation.
We're gonna
All
vote.
right?
So it goes back to the planning board, and
Yes.
the planning board, and then we go through this process again.
It would
Yes.
have gone back to the planning board for consistency no matter what.
Right.
Regardless.
All right?
So just to make it clear, the master plan is a living document.
It is.
So
It can be changed.
it can be changed. So if we say yes or no, say we say no, right? It can go, and 2 years from now, we're in a tailspin and we reconsider. It can be changed.
Yeah, and I can provide a little clarification on the master plan process. So a town's master plan is required by state law to be re-examined every 10 years, but there's nothing that says you can't re-examine all of it or even a portion of it anytime within that 10-year span. The downtown plan was done is not a required, so your land use plan, your housing plan, those are required by state law. The downtown plan is an optional element, an economic plan essentially is what it is. And New Providence decided, again, based on the fact that you have a nice downtown, to prepare a master plan of the downtown. So if it comes to it, if this council, as it is a different council than it was 6 years ago, decides to re-examine it, it could be done in a discrete, more of a discrete way. It is not required, but you could absolutely do it. It is a living document. It can be amended at any time.
I think Mr. Grove made the point that if we pass it, and we put the 3 stories in, okay, and we see a building and we say, wow, you know, this was a mistake. Yeah, you can't tear it down, but you can immediately change it. So no other building like that goes in town, you know, and, you know, there were buildings, I don't know, what's the Bank of America, and they're all like 35 or whatever. So, I mean, really what you're talking about with the 38 is covering, is the parapet and maybe designed so you don't see all the HVAC.
Yeah, and it might encourage some sloped roofs over
So-
a flat roof.
And, you know, just to be clear, right, the master plan is a design plan to look ahead, right?
Right.
So we're not trying to predict the future, but we're trying to say, you know, worst case scenario, best case scenario, what do we want? And how do we want to have responsible development within the town, right?
It's
if
a
we don't-
policy guide.
Right, and if we don't, right, what we get is we get a lot of hodgepodge, you know, things, and that's why we have a zoning board, right? Someone wants to buy one property and do one specific thing to it that's out of this specific ordinance, they go to the zoning board, they get it denied, they can sue the town, they can maybe get it approved, right? Maybe the zoning board approves it. And what you have is you have a hodgepodge of stuff, right? So what do we try to do on the planning board? What's the planning board's job, right? What's our planner's job? They're to look at the town today, the town next 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and try to develop a plan that has design standards that we want, right? So that we don't get a hodgepodge of, you know, construction, right? So I think there was a lot of very good comments today. You know, I disagree with some of them. You know, I don't think we rushed this through. This was something that the planning board did 6 years ago over a period of a long time, which also had multiple public meetings, right? So we had public come in, we had the designs out there, we had cards and pictures and, you know, presentations for the public to come and look at all the design standards that we were looking at, and public community looked at them, right? And you know, there wasn't a big outcry, right, of that. So, you know, again, looking long term, looking into the future and trying to create design standards for what we think, you know, we want reasonable, you know, development, is what's going on at the end of the day, right? And the last thing I want to say is, being on the planning board, I haven't seen any, we've had a couple of applications come in. Since this was implemented or created and not approved, how many of those applications would have been approved in the last 6 or 7 years for a 3-story building at 45 feet if we had implemented this 6 years ago? None, right? They would have had to have had a variance for parking. So again, long term, what do we want to look at our town long term? What do we want to try to make sure that we design standards and implement things that are consistent with what our planners and our planning boards and zoning boards are seeing?
I agree with Matt. We can't take a myopic approach to this topic. And I'll just give an anecdote before anyone here was on council years ago. Al, I think you were the mayor. We had wanted to put a traffic light at the intersection of Central and Maple, right? And we had wanted to put there for a while. There was residents that were complaining about it, saying it would back up traffic on Central, on Maple Street. They didn't want it. Even after a person died at the intersection, they still objected to that traffic light, right? It is our job to take a longer term approach and view of that traffic light, much like it is for this issue.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's debating the merits of having a master plan, a forward-looking. That's we're not debating that. That's important. We all agree. I think where the conversation is tonight is the fact that 2 weeks ago we had a master plan that was a number of years old that proposed 3 stories, 45 feet. Now that has been tempered somewhat, not enough to my satisfaction, but tempered somewhat. And yeah, it's hard to look forward. And I don't know where the economy's going, but what I do know is there's a number of sites in town that are on track to be developed. We're on track to have many, many new residences in this town. And I think that would, what's being proposed would further complicate as far as from a traffic and parking standpoint. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
I also would like to say that regarding the townhouses, I have spoken to other people and I just wanted to put it on record, I guess, that I don't think it's a good idea to have them on Elkwood either. That's the consensus. And I understand your point, but you're saying that it's a transition, but there's already a transition there because they're single family houses. So that's what people have been telling me.
If somebody were to buy that property, one of those properties on Elkwood, and say a builder came in and wanted to put a townhouse there. So we're just looking at height now, but we're not saying you can't put a townhouse. If somebody sells a piece of property and somebody comes in and wants to put townhouses, is there some kind of ordinance saying that they can't do that?
Currently?
Yes.
Currently, they would have to go to the zoning board for a use variance.
Okay.
Right. But I do want to you did remind me, nobody could buy one of those properties and build townhouses. They would have to combine properties because we do have minimum lot standards, and a townhouse is defined as 3 or more units in a row. So if a developer or anyone would want to do that, it couldn't be just on one of those properties. You'd have to consolidate.
I think 3 of them are owned by the same person at this point.
Are they?
Okay. Let's go to committee reports. Everything's pretty operations normal, but we did have the PBA car show, which was great. I tell you, a lot of people had a lot of really good time. It was a lot of fun. Coming up, the Rotary Club is going to celebrate 100 years. And we're going to make them a proclamation, and Nadine and I are going to the dinner. And I just want to thank Reverend Colleen Fletcher of the Presbyterian Church. She's helped a lot of people over the years, and she's retiring at the end of the month. So I just want to thank her. She's a wonderful person, and wish her all the best in the future. Okay. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I also attended the PBA car show. I say, wow, it was awesome, right? They moved it to the pool. It was so much better. And the traffic flow, walking around and seeing all the cars was really, really cool. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a Lamborghini there. There was a couple of Lotus. I'm a car guy. I mean, there was some
Shelby's.
Shelby's. There was like 10 years of Corvettes. I mean, that was really, really cool. I actually got a picture of my son. There's the big pickup truck, the big monster truck, thank you, that was there for the last few years. And so I had a picture of my son a few years ago where his head came up to like the middle of the tire, and now he's above the tire. So it's kind of cool, to see how that developed. And the PBA did a fantastic job. The food trucks, all the raffles, and so I'm glad there was a lot of people out there supporting them. That was awesome. The only other thing I wanted to say was the scarecrows that are going up in town. And I have zero input on any of the voting, but I just wanted to say that my early favorite by far is the Dr. Bob scarecrow with the free pugs. I mean, that's a pretty good one. It's really hard to beat.
I'm gonna have to recuse myself from that vote. In full transparency, we have a pug, so. Yeah, the car show was just a perfect event. I mean, the weather was spectacular too. My parents who live in town, I attended the event with my father, and it was a real special day for us. So we had a great time. Capital Review Committee, I reached out to our borough administrator. I'd like to perhaps call the team together to look at the upcoming year as far as a detailed plan. Sustainability, I did not attend the last meeting. My co-liaison, Councilwoman McKnight, did, and she'll be providing an update, so thank you.
Okay. Last Saturday, the Diversity Committee had their Hispanic Heritage event right out at Centennial Park, and they did an absolutely amazing job. It was so well done, so well organized, down to the very nice details. It was hosted by 2 high school students, one from New Providence High School, one from Union Catholic. I know it's
Velasquez is from New Providence and Casey Arias, I'm probably mispronouncing her name. She's a New Providence resident from Union Catholic.
and they did an absolutely phenomenal job introducing everybody and emceeing the event. They were very seasoned pros. We had a great array of performances. There was a very fun Zumba activity, which some of us participated in. And it was great. It was really a lot of fun. So I just want to thank the entire diversity committee for bringing this event, not only this event, but the event also at the library. So the entire month of Hispanic Heritage Month. I'd like to thank the diversity committee for that. It was an outstanding event, and we're looking to make it bigger and better next year. Following up on what Councilman Comiskey said, yes, the New Providence business is once again hosting the Scarecrow Stroll-In Contest, bringing a festive feel to our downtown. So all the scarecrows are on the various light poles, and they all have numbers on them. So come and visit, and then go into the stores and or restaurants, and you can vote for the scarecrow that you like the best. There's categories. There's one ages 14 and under, ages 15 and over. There's a category for organizations and school, and a category for businesses. And if you look, there's several committees this year who are participating. So if you check those out and then give a vote in your favorite store or restaurant. They'll be there until, I believe, November 1st.
Well, I did forget a couple things. The trunk or treat pumpkin carving
That's coming up.
is on October 22nd at the community pool. Flyers and events will be going out. That's hosted by the PBA and the New Providence Lions Club.
I think it's 3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock. The other thing was that Nick Velasquez made a beautiful picture of diversity. And he gave it to the Borough of New Providence. Now Laura is going to frame it. The thing's beautiful.
What is the picture?
It's the
It's a
it's
sun.
the globe with the Americas on it, and it says inclusivity, and it's a beautiful piece of artwork. So hopefully she'll have it framed, and maybe Nick can give it to us at next meeting.
That's a good idea.
Okay, Rob,
Yeah, operation is normal for me, Mr. Mayor.
beautiful.
Good job.
Lisa,
All I have is sustainability. So basically, we did go over the free cycle event. We talked about that at the last council meeting, but that was the committee's opportunity to recap what went well, what didn't go so well. Overall, that was a great event and needed little improvement for next year. One of the things that came up was, we like to donate our items. Nobody wants to throw away perfectly good items. So the committee's thinking of putting together a resource list of, if you have furniture, if you have toys, if you have sneakers, these are organizations that will accept these type of donations, where to bring them, how to bring them. So that is something that they're thinking of doing. And the other is to put together a list of events for the coming year. One being maybe a mini free cycle, in addition to the regular larger one, and a combination of Green Day, Earth Day. So stay tuned.
Diane,
Well, something we've all been hearing about, thank you. Don't forget about the referendum for the Board of Ed. It is on their website, and any additional information, I can talk to anybody about it because I'm well versed in it. The other thing is Historical Society, 4 Centuries in a Weekend is next weekend, and just go look at their website. Everything is on there, all the details. And the cemetery tours are also back for next weekend.
and they are interesting.
They're fantastic.
Okay, Bernadette,
Just one thing, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody that leaf collection starts on the 24th on the south side of town, which is the west side of town, South Street to Berkeley Heights. If you don't have your leaf permit yet, you can obtain them online or through the clerk's office.
okay, already got it.
$55, and you'll get the placard.
The kids, right? Trust fund. Check.
We didn't get the check yet.
Oh.
We were awarded $35,000 though through the Kids Rec Trust Fund grant, which will go towards a playground at Lions Park next year.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We'll take formal action, items 2 through, what? I did a public hearing.
No, that was on the.
Okay, Alan.
You had public comments all
I
together.
did it. I mixed it up.
It was all
Go
one.
ahead.
I would have commented earlier if you wanted to. I assume you opened it up for the comments on the
said public
ordinance, so
comments,
that's
but
what
that's fine.
I just was anticipating that this moment would come. I didn't intend speaking about this at all. In town, you frequently bring up long-term residents who have been here and when they pass and the contributions that they've made. I wanted to mention that someone passed too, that I got to know through political activity, Maureen Piggott, a few days ago. And she and her husband, Rich, lived here for many decades. I'm sure you all know her and Richard. And she passed away. And I didn't know her. I'm not going to do her justice right now. I can tell you, because I knew her from the mutual activities that we were involved with. But there are some things I just found out that you find out when this happens. It turns out that she was a private duty nurse to Eleanor Roosevelt. She worked on the McGovern and the McCarthy campaigns. She, of course, was very active in town here, and apparently very active with the formation of the alliance in town. And in fact, the family, my understanding has said that in lieu of sending flowers, they would appreciate if there were donations made to the alliance. So I just thought it was important to recognize that Maureen has passed.
She's a wonderful woman. I knew her for years. Used to deliver to her house on Evergreen, and No, it's sad. I didn't even know she passed away.
Just,
And, now our condolences go out to her and her family. I know her, her daughter Amy's still in town, so she was a school nurse too.
yes, that was, apparently she was active in
Very active.
forming some of the curriculum related to some of the health matters as a nurse.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to address council? Seeing no one, we'll go to, discussion, formal action. Items 2 through 8, please.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeSarno.
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Munoz.
Yes.
Mrs. McKnight. Yes. Mrs. Belisca.
Item 1, motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeSarno.
This is ordinance 2022-15 we're talking?
Yes, it is.
No.
Mrs. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Munoz.
Yes.
Mrs. McKnight.
I'm gonna vote no.
Mrs. Belisca.
No.
Nate?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. And I want the planning board to give a recommendation. Okay, let's see.
Oh, no, executive.
Oh, we have to go into executive session, resolution 2022
5A.
5A.
Resolution establishing October 11th, 2022 as the date and 8:50 PM as the time in the municipal center as a place for the holding of a special session of the mayor and council of the Borough of New Providence to discuss contract negotiations involving police labor unions.
Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeSarno.
Aye.
Mrs. Joffrey.
Yes.
Mr. Munoz.
Yes.
Mrs. McKnight.
Yes.
Mrs. Belisca.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight.